Why the fuck not, man? Let's continue. 10.43 Stakeholder List map or personas. Stakeholder List, stakeholder map or personas. A persona is basically a character you create that kind of like feels like the person that you're interacting with. A stakeholder list is you kind of making a list around the people. As always, I always explain what I think it is and then we read. So calm the fuck down. A placeholder list slash map or personas is شو اسمه. All right, amazing. What am I thinking about? Stakeholder lists are the people that are involved that you think are involved. A map is how they're connected, and personas are the characters that you kind of like give them, the characteristics you give them. The stakeholder list maps and personas assist the business analyst in analyzing stakeholders and their characteristics. This analysis is important in ensuring that business analyst identifies all possible sources of requirements and the stakeholder is fully understood, so decisions made regarding stakeholder engagement, collaboration, communication, and the best choices and blah, 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 blah. There's a list, there's a fucking map, and there's a persona. Like, who the fuck the stakeholder is, what's it mapped to, like, what are your work, and like, what are they? What are they? As in, like, common types of stakeholder characteristics are worth identifying. Authority level with domain, change, and organization. Attitudes towards the interest and the change being undertaken. Attitudes towards the business analysis work and role, level of decision-making authority. Like, these are characteristics of the stakeholders that you're working with. It could also be like 9 to 5. It could also be like he checks in while other stakeholders just sign or something like that. When analyzing stakeholders, business analysts utilize one or more techniques and draw out a list of stakeholders and analyze them. Stakeholder list maps and personas are 3 tools that can be utilized when conducting this work. A business analyst, a stakeholder list, elements. What are the elements? Well, a stakeholder list, a business analyst may apply a number of techniques to generate a stakeholder list. Brainstorming, interviews, and 2 common techniques could be used. You could just watch the processes that are happening and see how they connect, because you're probably giving a solution for something that's already there. And stakeholder analytic activities like planning work and business analyst performs, elicitation, collaboration, communication, like always. Stakeholder list may become quite lengthy as analysis is conducted. The business analyst categorizes and adds structure to the list. It is important to have an exhaustive list to ensure that no important stakeholder or stakeholder group has been overlooked. It doesn't mean you have to do all the list or use all the list, but you have to kind of like build it, which opens up the risk of requirements that would be missed later on, blah, blah, blah. It's like, don't fuck about. There are some things you need to kind of like finalize as best as you can, but then you can average things out, or you can kind of like mitigate risk in between. Like, do I have to spend 20 fucking hours in order to like interview every single person on the list, or kind of like just kind of like connect a certain like relationship between all of them and interview on that basis, right? A map is a diagrams that depict the relationship or stakeholders to the solution and to one another. Exactly. And there are forms of stakeholder maps. There's the matrix and the onion diagram. Onion diagram seems to be more, this is it. There's the affected external stakeholders, organizational diagram, never mind. And a matrix is basically what a business analyst typically starts with, a stakeholder matrix. Like, here he's splitting it by influence and impact. High influence, low impact, high influence, high impact. You got it. And keep informed stakeholder, and he's splitting them basically and putting names. So ultimately, on a day-to-day basis, he kind of has that kind of like go-around thing. At the start of this analysis, the business analyst may produce a stakeholder matrix to identify each stakeholder and their role, and it pertains to the development of the requirements. Throughout a project, the stakeholder's position on the matrix can change due to organizational, environmental, or requirement scope changes, even as like maybe I need him first now and I don't need him as much later on, right? Due to these potential changes, stakeholder analysis is considered iterative and reviewed frequently by the business analyst. It's always iterative. High influence, high impact. The stakeholder are key players in the change effort. The business analyst should focus their efforts and engage this group regularly. High influence, low impact. The stakeholders have needs that should be met. The business analyst should engage and consult with them. So high influence, high impact, high influence, low impact, low influence, high impact, low influence, low impact. Stakeholders are supporters of the potential goodwill ambassadors of the change effort, the low influence, high impact. Right? Like if it's a consultant from the outside, like he has high impact, but he has low influence because it's not within. And you'll figure it out, man. Low influence, low impact. Stakeholders can be kept informed using general communications. And the onion diagram is basically just kind of like, the core and how it kind of like, how other stakeholders impact it or how it impacts the stakeholders. So I feel the matrix is up-down because it's authorization. It comes from authorization, while the onion is down-up, and it comes from impact, because like in the solution delivery, who would be affected? Who's the organization or enterprise? Well, yeah, because like a stakeholder sometimes is a recipient or is a deliverer, but you have to consider both. So it feels like these two kind of go together. But it's layers, right? Like in the solution delivery, like what unit does it affect directly, and how it affects the organization, and then eventually how it affects the rest of the world. And then there's the responsibility matrix, which is RACI. Another popular stakeholder matrix is responsibility matrix. It stands for the 4 types of responsibility that a stakeholder may hold on the initiative: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. When completing the RACI matrix, it is important to ensure that all stakeholders or stakeholder groups have been identified. Further analysis is then conducted to assign the RACI designation in order to specify the level of responsibility expected from each stakeholder and/or group. It is common practice to define each term so that a consistent understanding of the assignment and associated roles are understood by any stakeholders utilizing the RACI matrix. The one is responsible, the second is A is accountable, C is consulted, I is informed. So the person who will be performing the work on the task is the responsible one. The accountable ones, their purpose will ultimately help accountable for it. Consulted, the stakeholder group who will be, right? Like responsible is high, seems to be basically high impact, high influence. High impact, low influence, that's the responsible one. Or high influence, low impact, that's the responsible one. Right? And the accountable one seems to be high impact, high influence. And the consulted one seems to be high influence, low impact. High impact, low influence. High influence, low impact is the responsible. High influence, low impact is the high impact is low influence is the consulted. High influence, low impact is the responsible one. And the informed one is basically low. A stakeholder group is kept on a date to task and notified of its outcome. Informed is different from consulted. With the informed, it's just basically a communication, one direction, business analyst. And it's basically documentation from the external world, I guess. And this is how it would look like, basically. A, R, C, C, I. You're kind of like splitting them by R, A, C, I. Right? But there is weight behind their presence, and it feels like all of them kind of like mixed together. What about 4? Personas. A persona is defined as a fictional character or an archetype that defines the way a typical user interacts with the product. Personas are helpful when there is a desire to understand the needs held by the group or class of users. You do actually user interviews in order to decide on your persona. You kind of like meet with the people that use the product, especially with something that you're kind of like creating a solution for, right? So you talk to these people, and as you talk to these people, you kind of like build an image of what exactly you're doing and why you're doing it. And then from there, you kind of like develop your way all the way down. And a number of elicitation techniques can be utilized to conduct the research. Interviews, surveys, questionnaires are 2 techniques commonly used to elicit this information. The persona is written in narrative form and focuses on providing insight to the goals of the group. This allows the reader to see the story from the point of view of the stakeholder group. Personas helping to bring the user to life, which in turn makes the needs feel real, so the who design the build solutions. You really are you're humanizing the actual consumption of the product. You really have to think about it this way. Because a lot of time we go like, this solves a problem, but we never look at who would use it. We never look at how that would make them feel or why would they buy it, right? So research is conducted to do the user group. What about the consideration? Strengths identifies specific people who must be engaged in requirements elicitation. Activities helps the business analyst plan collaboration, communication, and facilitation. Activities to engage all stakeholder groups, useful to understand changes is impacted groups over time. Limitations, useful to understand changes and impacted groups over time. Yes. Because like once you kind of like set the stakeholders and you map them to the solution and the personas, that you kind of see how where stakeholders are the initial part from the inside out, basically. Personas are also stakeholders, but a persona is a characteristic of the stakeholder, right? It's kind of like this is the ideal customer or something like that. A business analyst who are continually working with the same team may not utilize the stakeholder analysis and management technique because they perceive change as minimal within their respective groups. Assessing information about specific stakeholder representatives, such as influence and interest, can be complicated and may feel politically risky, because you're always talking to people, and when it comes to people, they won't tell you the truth. Or at the very least, they judge. Ugh. Next up is state modeling. I love you guys. We're almost there.